All right. Yes, Genesis 34 is where we're going to be. We're going to go over a little bit at the end of chapter 33 as well. I wanted to draw your attention to Genesis 33, verse 14. Remember what was happening the last time we were there, for those who were here. But in the story, Jacob has come back towards his homeland, and his brother Esau, who last he knew wanted to kill him, ended up meeting him. And their reunion ended up being good. They were both overjoyed to see each other, actually. And they have this conversation that goes on about where they're going to go and who's going to go where. There in verse 14, we can start in 13. You see that it says, "But Jacob said to him," to Esau, "My Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard, one day all the flock will die. Please, let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure, until I come to my Lord in Seir." And Esau said, "Now let me leave you with some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. We had looked a bit at the maps at the back of our Bibles last week, as far as where some of these locations were. As far as where Edom is. Does anybody remember roughly where Edom is in regards to the area of Canaan? You should have a map in the back of your Bible somewhere that shows, one that particularly shows the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, where those locations are. And if you'll find one, you'll notice that Edom is actually to the south of where the Dead Sea is. So we roughly have, let's kind of draw that. Here, you've got Dead Sea down here. Yep, they're all round. Everything's round. Down south of that, you have Edom. This is where Esau had been. This is where he'd been for the last who knows how many years, maybe up to 20 years. And where he had come from to meet Jacob, as Jacob was coming back from Padan Aram, in around the city of Haran, which is, on this map, it's a long ways up there. It's like above the ceiling. It's a long ways away. It's a couple hundred miles to the north and a little bit to the east. And he had come and met, there's a river. Where's that river? The Jabbok River. Right about here, there's a river. Jacob had been coming down, and this is where, roughly, Esau had met him, is right here about this river. Esau had come up from Edom all the way up there to where Jacob was. Jacob had been coming south, towards the land of his fathers. This is where they had met and reunited and had that conversation that we just read over. And now where does Jacob say that he is going to go at this point? Particularly in, in verse 14. Where does Jacob say that he is intending to head to? To Seir, which is in Edom. He tells his brother that he's intending to come down here where his brother is, and they'll both end up getting to be together. Where had, conversely, God told him to go? When he came to him in chapter 31. We look in verse 3 and verse 13 in chapter 31. Where had God told Jacob to go back to?
The land of his fathers.
Yep, the land of his father. It doesn't give him a particular, as far as we know, a particular town to go to. It just says the land of his fathers. And which would be what? What would we consider, or what do you think he would have considered the land of his father? Or fathers? Be what? Back home? Yeah, which would have been where for him?
Where he was born.
Roughly where he was born. Right. Which would have been, on our map, somewhere around here. Would have been where he was born. So he's got all kinds of directions that he is heading at this point. God told him to get back there, and certainly he is a lot closer to the land of his fathers than where he had been when God told him to leave. He was way up there somewhere. He came back down this direction, meets his brother, tells his brother, yep, I'll come along just really slow. You go on ahead, but we will make it down to your home pretty soon, down here in Edom. We see verse 17 in chapter 33. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram. And he pitched his tent before the city. And he bought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. If you have detailed enough map, you'll notice that Shechem is not in Edom, where he told his brother he was going. Shechem is roughly right about here. Instead of going south to where his brother is, he went west and over here. And it's not like he was kind of planning this whole journey to go along. He built himself a house, and he built booths for his animals to stay in. They weren't journeying through. He kind of went there and went, we're going to hang out here for a significant period of time. So we still see, despite the maturation Jacob has gone through, still see some deception going on in his life. For what reason, don't know. But we do get to see the consequences of not doing either what he was particularly told by God. He's certainly back in the area of the land of his fathers, and also not doing what he said he would have done to his brother. And we end up in chapter 34, which is an unfortunate incident. I'm going to go ahead and read that. Genesis 34. Now Dinah, and you will hear from people here saying it's either Dinah or Dina. Dina is the correct, I suppose you'd say, way to say it, with the inflections they would have. I's were E's. I'm just saying Dinah because it makes more sense for me in English. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved and very angry, because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife, and make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters to yourselves. So you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade in it, and acquire possessions for yourselves in it." Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, and I will give according to what you say to me. But give me the young woman as a wife." But the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father, and spoke deceitfully, because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said to them, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. But on this condition we will consent to you, if you will become as we are, if every male of you is circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone." And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. So the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He was more honorable than all the household of his father. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came to the gate of their city, and spoke with the men of their city, saying, These men are at peace with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For indeed, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us, to be our people, or to be one people. If every male among us is circumcised, as they are circumcised, will not their livestock, their property, and every animal of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of his city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. Every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. Now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, the two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, and their donkeys, what was in the city and what was in the field, and all their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives they took captive, and they plundered even all that was in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a harlot?" This is one of those stories that we find in the Bible that exposes the reality of life and choices, and how even the people that God has individually called out to be his people still were human. They weren't suddenly perfect people who we always look to as, a father of the faith. They always mention Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here's Jacob, his family, his sons, doing this deed in this country. It's certainly not an honorable thing. And as far as the story goes, I don't think that if it was just people writing a story about their ancestors, they would include something like this. This doesn't put their family in good light of any kind. There's no advancement of the story, really, of what's going on through Jacob's life and how he is becoming one of the ancestors of the Israelites. It doesn't advance that story at all. It doesn't give us crucial details that we need for later on in how things end up playing out. It doesn't have a whole lot of results or lessons that are mentioned much later on either. It only reveals the actions that people can and did take. It's one interesting thing I noticed studying through this chapter. Who, very important player in all of Jacob's life so far, who is never mentioned in this story that would be very important, should have been very important to the things that went on here?
His wife.
His wife's never mentioned. That's true. Well, the Lord. That's the one I noticed that was really big. He is completely absent from this chapter. The very last words of the previous chapter are El Elohi Israel, which literally means God, the God of Israel. He's in the very last words of the previous chapter, and he's in the very second word of the next chapter. Chapter 35 starts, "Then God said." His name is not in chapter 34. The events and the actions that happened here were not what God led them to. They didn't seek his counsel. They didn't ask for his advice. They didn't proclaim his name at all. He's completely absent from this. That even people who are on their way to being very good take detours and make terrible, terrible mistakes along the way that they have to pay for later on. The meaning of Dinah's name is also interesting. From chapter 30, verse 21, when she's named, her name means judgment. Just curious because of what her life causes in this section. And so we see that Dinah went out. She's the only daughter that we know of Jacob. He had 12 sons that are recorded and one daughter. So probably at home she was kind of outnumbered. I'm sure Jeff could That's a good way to look at it. She was very protected. Yes.
Protected her.
Yeah, she would have been very safe at home. She's got a lot of family that's obviously very passionate about making sure she's safe. I don't think she saw it that way every day. It seems that she got kind of bored at being at home, surrounded by a bunch of guys and her two moms, who didn't get along at all, by the way. We've noticed that. And she goes out to see the daughters of the land. And by what we see in the rest of the story, we note that she didn't go out in a wise way, perhaps. It would have been fine to go out and just see what's in the world. She didn't go with any of her brothers. She didn't go with her father. And from what we can tell, they didn't know that she had gone out there. She went out there completely unprotected. She was just curious. I wonder what's out there in the world. I just want to go see it. I didn't say she intended to go out and do anything. She just wanted to go see everything. Curiosity kills the cat. I've heard that statement. Killed a lot of people in this story, actually. She was unable to, in a spiritual sense, she was unable to wait on God to bring to her what God wanted for her. She went out to see what was out there, and perhaps to take some of that as well. In Titus chapter 2, verses 3 through 5, Paul's writing this. The older women, talking about the roles that people should be having. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. Now, we have no indication that Dinah was married at all, certainly. So she wouldn't have been staying home and being obedient to her husband. But if she had been staying home and being taught by her mothers these sorts of things, this story certainly wouldn't have happened. It doesn't say she could never leave home, but there were wise ways to do it that she did not go along with. Her attitude that I see reminded me of that song, "Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the Lord I love." That she may have been somewhat happy at home, but she still had that wanderlust inside of her, wanting to go out and just see what was in the rest of the world. And experience it. Experience can be good. Experience can be very bad also. It's not the best way to learn always. And that desire for more than what God had given her is what cannot be good. And she went out there alone, not just to see, likely, but also probably to be seen. She was, again, surrounded by 12 brothers and her father and her two mothers who bickered all the time. She probably wanted to go out and make some friends, maybe. See what was out in the world. And have someone appreciate her for what she was. She didn't get, I'm sure, a lot of appreciation for being a woman at home. Her brothers wouldn't have done that. So it's possible that was part of her desire out there as well, to be seen by some of the sons of the land and not just to see the daughters of the land. And we see the person that caused this Shechem, the son of Hamor, the prince of the country, is the one who went and did this. Someone who, perhaps if they had picked somebody out in the world to take her and show her the world, that might have been one of the guys who would have done. Oh, prince. He's going to be honorable. He's going to be a good guy. He's the one who went and violated their daughter. Guy who would have been, who knows, second or third in that area as far as authority went. Had no particular morality to speak of. And he may have been a ruler in the land, but he was certainly slave to his own desires and his own lusts. And the circumstances of her actual violation, which, make no mistake about it, that would have been a sexual violation. That's what went on here. They're not given. It just says he took her, he lay with her, and he violated her. We don't know if he kidnapped her and raped her, if it was a very consensual thing. She got caught up in partying and, hanging out with this guy who was really cool, and he was, the son of the guy who ruled the land and had a good night. We don't know. We do know that this happened. This word violated is not a word that connotates something violent. It's not the way we typically see it, that if someone is violated, that they had something done to them that they were not in agreement with at the moment. The word that's used is just one that means to be brought low or to be abased, which in her case, to have her virginity taken away from her would have, especially outside of a marriage, brought her low in the eyes of most anybody. Certainly her family sees it as a very bad thing. We shouldn't just assume that it was all on the guy at this point. We don't know either way. We just know this is what happened. And the way everyone else sees it, and even Hamor, his father, and Shechem himself realized that, probably shouldn't have done it that way, and he needs to marry this lady. Tries to go out and do the good things after that. In verse 3, it indicates the feelings that Shechem had for Dinah. It indicates a desire for her, especially the way that he says to his father in verse 4, "Get me this young woman as a wife." Doesn't really give us a sense of he really cared for her as a person. He cared for her for what she could give to him, what she could do for him. This love was more of a lust attraction instead of a desire to care for her and really want her as a person. Not caring so much about her welfare. It was more of a get me something that I really like and really want because it made me feel better. He does, however, act somewhat honorably. More so than Jacob and his family do, for sure, in the course of events. Here's a curious one. What is Jacob's response when he hears about what has happened?
You put me in a bad light.
Well, no, right here when he hears that his daughter has been defiled,
Oh.
What is his response? What does he do or say?
He's angry.
We can assume he's pretty angry. It doesn't actually say that.
It said he held his peace.
He didn't do anything.
He was there.
Which, could be some self-restraint on his side, but ultimately, it would have been his job to take care of this situation on his family's end, and he doesn't do anything. He's either frozen in fear, because he's not sure what to do, he's worried about himself reacting in his anger, and so he holds himself back from, wanting to kill everyone. Either way, he doesn't do anything in this story until the very end when he says to his kids that they've made him look bad. He doesn't do anything. He waits for his sons to come in, and they end up handling the whole situation instead of their father.
How old was Jacob?
That is a very interesting question. It actually took me a while to figure out roughly how old he is. He's somewhere between 60 and 80 at this point.
Why would he have his son take care of it?
Because he's old.
Well, he did it without his permission.
Okay.
Well, he was there. It's an interesting thing to know. The murder part, yes. I don't think he was assenting to that. He may have not known. But the problem in all of that is it was his job to be in charge of the situation, and he wasn't. From what we see, he didn't do anything. For men, for fathers, for heads of households, that's our job. Is if something like this comes up, we take care of it. We may not know what to do, but it's imperative that we find out and that we be the leader in those situations. Because if we don't, what will happen? Somebody is going to act. This situation happened. Jacob didn't do anything. Does that mean nothing happened? No. There were still emotions running pretty strongly in his sons, and we see what they end up doing. They end up with this plan that took several days to unfold. Two of them go and murder a whole town because Jacob didn't do anything, ultimately. And in that void of leadership that the father was supposed to have, ultimately sin came in to his own family because of his unwillingness, for whatever reason, to take control and lead his family. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, we see the way that God indicates parents, and fathers in particular, should be taking care of their families. In chapter 6, Deuteronomy, verses 5 through 9, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." This indicates a very proactive teaching of the principles and the words that God would have passed on. We don't know how much of that Jacob would have had at this point, because here Deuteronomy is God relating all of this to the Israelites several hundred years later. But he certainly would have had an understanding of, you don't get retribution for your daughter being violated by tricking a bunch of people into mutilating themselves and then going and murdering them. Not argued to be a godly thing. So there's no way he would have been teaching them that. He should have been teaching them what would have been right, or how to go about doing things in a good way, how to respond to something like this, which is terrible, and make good come of it. And the second part there, in that same chapter in Deuteronomy, chapter 6, we go up to verse 20. "When your son asks you in time to come, saying, 'What is the meaning of the testimonies, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord our God has commanded you?' Then you shall say to your son, 'We were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed signs and wonders before our eyes, great and severe, against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his household. Then he brought us out from there, that he might bring us in, to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is this day. Then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us.'" There, in that, certainly Jacob didn't have that to refer back to when he's teaching his kids. But he had plenty of other experiences in his life that he could have used to teach his children why they should be doing these things. For us as fathers, there should be things in our families that we do on purpose, or that we don't do on purpose, that might raise questions to our kids, because they're going to notice we are different from what the rest of the world does. Even as simple as, on Sunday morning, we come into church and we sit for a few hours and sing and have someone teach and learn more about God. And why do we do that? He's indicating here that our response should be predicated on why we believe in God and the things he has done for us, the actual practical experiences. He's telling them in Deuteronomy, tell them what happened in Egypt, what happened to Pharaoh, all the things that God has done as he's brought us through the Red Sea and destroyed a whole army by crashing the water down upon them. All these practical things they had seen with their own eyes as the reason to their children as to why they were different than the rest of the world and why they did what God wanted them to instead of being like everybody else. Jacob had those things in his life. He had seen things. He had seen the way God's hand had directly benefited him because he'd been faithful to God. He had those experiences to teach his children, and we see none of that happening here. And in the void of him doing his role as a father, his sons, untrained and very passionate, step in and take care of things. They're offended by the action of Shechem doing what's in verse 7. It's called a thing which ought not to be done. In Israel, notice, a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's father. Israel, not at this point a nation, really just their family and whatever servants and whatnot that they would have had with them. Still a disgraceful thing to all of them. They don't say that this offense offends them because it's a departure from godly behavior or good virtue just that it makes the honor of their family degraded. That it makes all of us look bad that this happened to her. That's their concern at this point. Not that it makes God look bad, that we're supposed to be God's people, and the reason we're here in this land is because God told us to come here. He made a covenant with our Father to give us this land. None of that. It's just, oh, you made our family look bad by having this thing happen. And no mention is made of anyone trying to address the cause of the sin, only the result of the sin. Just trying to deal with all the fallout instead of going, wow, that's pretty terrible what happened. Why did that happen? And let's see if we can fix that. Instead it's oh, that happened. Let's see how we can react to what has happened. We have to be careful not to be just reactionary to sin in our lives or sin in our family and what goes on there that we allow to go on maybe. But to search out the source of it, whatever the attitudes or the beliefs or jealousy that's going on that has caused those things. Because if we don't find out that and deal with it, that same thing or things like it are going to continue to happen. And certainly do in Jacob's life. He doesn't really deal with what caused this whole situation and what happens really just a few more years later. You remember the story of Joseph. They pretend to murder Joseph and tell Jacob that he'd been killed by wild animals. The same type of deception it kept occurring in his family because he didn't deal with it. And Shechem and Hamor, they make no attempt to apologize either. They're, we don't see them recognizing at all that what Shechem has done was even a bad thing. It's just, oh yeah, that happened, and now he really wants to marry her, so let's go make that happen. They don't try to go to the family and say, we're sorry for what happened, how can we make it up to you? One of the things we're going to do is marry them, and try and do a good thing there and bring them together as a family. They don't try to do anything. God just wants to get married to her because he really likes her. And in verse 8, the thing that Hamor says to Jacob and his family, as far as the reason here, it starts with, but Hamor spoke with them. And this comes right after the recognition in verse 7 that this was a thing which ought not to be done in Israel. He probably got a sense of that when he went there, that we know what you did, and it was really bad. His response is, oh, but the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. It's basically but he really likes her. You got to understand that he really does like her, and he wants to marry her. So that makes it okay, right? It makes it okay. We'll go with that. And they set about just to buy Dinah. And it's a interesting temptation that comes upon that family. Obviously, they don't go along with it, but we can see that temptation that's very common from the world. It's just, let's all just get along and be one big family, and your stuff's ours, our stuff's yours. We all just kind of do our own thing, but we're in the same place. We all get along together, and everything will be fine. Let's not worry what happened yesterday. Let's just get along today. We'll be okay. Marry us, we'll marry you. Everything's great. Jacob, my belief, he's there. He certainly is there as this is going on. He should have heard that and shut the whole proposal down at that point. Because remember what happened for him to get married. Where did he have to go? He was living in roughly in this area. I mean, right now they're about here where the star is. And they were, in this land of Canaan is the whole area, kind of. His father told him to do what? To get married. He had to go several hundred miles away because his father, in chapter 28, here in Genesis, starting in verse 1, chapter 28. Then Isaac, Jacob's father, called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And we skip to verse 8 in that same chapter. Also Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Isaac. Certainly Jacob remembered this. This is why he had to travel by himself halfway across the world that he may have known at the time to go work for 14 years to have his brides. It is because his father had not approved of the daughters of the land. This idea, then, of, let's just have all our kids intermingle and marry each other, he should have recognized this being anathema to the path that God had set his lineage on. His own father had sent him out of the country so that he wouldn't marry any of these people. He should have recognized the same thing for his sons. No, they're not going to marry you guys. And shut that whole proposal down. And we don't see anything from him at this point. Jacob isn't really ever, until the very end of his life, portrayed as a man who takes unled action. Very rarely does he ever do things because he recognizes it's totally right and he's not been told in some way to do it. So he goes and does it. The reason he deceived his father to get the birthright was because of his mother. The reason he left to go get married was because of his mother and his father. The reason he came back was because God told him to. All these things he was told to do otherwise. And in this situation, one, he doesn't have anyone telling him, hey, this is what you should do. And two, he doesn't go to God for direction in this. And so he's not sure what to do. He doesn't do anything. And he didn't negotiate anything. I think that if he and Hamor, the Shechem's father, had sat down and tried to work something out, they probably could have. No bloodshed, nothing terrible happening. He didn't do anything there. And note that Jacob is there in verse 11 when Shechem, the son, speaks up. Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, this being Dinah's father and Dinah's brothers, they're all there hearing this proposal. He tries to then sweeten the deal. His father had said, let's all just get along and, marry each other and we'll be happy in the land and everything will be cool. His son makes it even better and says, you know what? Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, a dowry being a bride price that they would pay for the groom to marry someone to kind of reimburse the family that the daughter was coming from. And I will give according to what you say to me, but give me the young woman as a wife. It's basically saying, whatever you want, I'll give it to you because I really like her. I'll do anything. Emotions and desire was certainly his ruler instead of any principles or morals at this point. He's willing to give whatever the cost is to have this woman that he really wants. And he's, there's an argument to be made that Hamor and Shechem are kind of trying to do the right thing after what has gone on. Yeah, unfortunate incident. But now let's have them get married to avoid the consequences that come along with it. We can't assume that doing the right thing after having done the wrong thing will end up negating the bad consequences that can come along from that. It may shunt them off for a while, but there will be a reckoning. There certainly is quite quickly in their lives of the choices that they have made. They couldn't escape the consequences just by changing their behavior and trying to be more good than they had been before. There's a verse in Matthew, chapter 12, verse 36. Jesus is speaking. He says this, but I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. If an account is going to be demanded for each of our words, how much more should we assume an account will be demanded for each of our actions? We can't just make up for it by, look, I did a good thing to make it okay, and that balances it out, and we never have to talk about it again. There's still going to be an accounting made for all of those things. If we're going to try and make up for it, we need to find out from God how we go about doing that and not just come up with our own plan. It'll still affect us either way. And Then in verse 13, we know Jacob is there because of verse 11. Verse 13, he doesn't speak up. He lets his sons speak up. The sons answer. And their answer from the very beginning here is deceitful. Their goal at this point was not to try and resolve the issue, not to try and get along with people that were there. Their goal already was retribution. They wanted to get back at these guys, and they had already formulated a plan that they follow through on how they were going to do that. Their passion directs their words and their actions in a very negative way. We have to be careful of that kind of thing, because things can happen and do happen in our lives that are very, very bad. We need to be careful not to react in our passion, not to react in anger or even joy if it's a seemingly good thing, and to just go with that, but to temper ourselves and not let those emotions and feelings be our guide. They can help indicate the way, but we still need to find out from God what the right thing to do is. They certainly didn't do that here. And they end up using circumcision as their bargaining tool. They don't ask for a price, really, of give us certain things, because that wouldn't work towards their end goal. They, in a manner of speaking, they prostitute out the sign of circumcision, of the covenant that God had given their family, so that they can get retribution and end up murdering a bunch of people. They say, we can't do this thing to give our daughter to one who's uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. Our sister, to one who's uncircumcised. They then relate, if you guys just get circumcised, we'll all be okay, and you can keep her as a wife. There's no relating of why circumcision is an important thing to them. Remember from Genesis 17, when God gives that sign of circumcision to Abraham. From a couple verses there. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless. It's verse 1. And skipping to verse 10. This is my covenant which you shall keep. This walk before me and be blameless. Between me and you and your descendants after you, every male child among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. It's not just a thing that they did to be more holy. It's like we see baptism as. It's an outward sign of a change that has to occur first in the heart. Without that personal change in attitude and desire, none of those things matter. This circumcision, they don't relate what it meant. They don't relate, it's a sign, it's a covenant between us and God that we will do the things He teaches us. It's just, it's a family custom. You got to be circumcised, and then we'll all be okay. Let us never portray the things that we do that set us apart. And certainly the circumcision made them different from the rest of the people in the area. And it set them apart. That's the literal meaning of the word holy, is to be set apart. God calls us to be holy, calls us to be different than what we find in the world around us. That was one of the ways that they showed that, was their circumcision. But apart from the change in their heart, it was useless. And we have to be careful about not portraying those things we do because we are set apart as the things that make us set apart. Whatever it might be, is reading our Bibles or singing Christian songs or going to church or praying or abstaining from certain things in the world, staying pure until marriage, not doing drugs because that's an evil thing. Whatever it might be, if it's done apart from, because I'm trying to honor God and be set apart for Him, they're utterly useless. They profit nothing without that personal commitment to Him. And here we see them relating one of those really significant signs without what would actually make it be worthwhile. And it certainly isn't worthwhile to them, as we see. there's not any kind of immunity to condemnation that we gain by accumulating all of these holy actions in our lives. And that goes back to what we read in Deuteronomy about when our children ask us, why do we do these things? We need to be ready with that answer of because God and because we are seeking to be holy and to be honorable to Him is why we do all these things. Not just to get along with our community and be happy because, we're part of the church and that's just the things that they do, so we do it with them. That doesn't confer holiness upon a person. There's no herd immunity that goes on by being around other good people and doing the good things that they're doing. Only being one of the actual faithful people is useful to us. And despite this crazy idea of go and circumcise all the guys in your town, Shechem and Hamor still do it. In Shechem particularly, in verse 18, and their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's sons. So the young man, should be Shechem, did not delay to do the thing. He was on board with this covenant. He went, okay, that's your price, let's go do it. I'm on it. He, in this case, verse 19, he was more honorable than all the household of his father. He's certainly more honorable also than all the household of Jacob at this point. He's actually going to honor this covenant that they have made. He said, okay, we'll go do our part. And he goes, and between he and his father, they convince the rest of the town to go ahead and do this. These guys, may have not cared about it, but they cared enough to go along and have this procedure, which is painful, and more painful as the days go by, done to them. Part of it is in verse 23, what got them to go along with it. Will not their livestock, their property, and every animal of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. Their incentive was not just the possibility of intermarrying with this large group of people that had come down, but also all their stuff. We know that Jacob had a lot of animals and servants and whatnot that he had traveled down from Padan Aram with. He had quite large flocks, and they kind of wanted those things. It's interesting how great the power of covetousness can be in people's lives. What they will do in order to gain more stuff. And what Shechem was willing to do in order to gain a woman and convinced everyone else to go along with.
There doesn't seem to be all that dishonorable. I mean, you made a mistake, you recognized it, and now it seems like he's trying to go back and do something about it versus just letting it go. And whatever I got to do to make it right, we see a little bit of motive of maybe we get some of their stuff, but I mean, I don't know that's completely it other than...
Yeah, I think it was more about convincing the rest of the people. Certainly he and his father were kind of in agreement of let's do whatever we can to, make this okay and make it not be a problem. I don't know about the rest of the town being convinced of, we're going to do what? Just so you can marry this woman?
No, I wasn't thinking
I don't think so.
that he was more honorable than the rest of the household. At least he's trying to go make his wrong right by trying to do whatever it takes to clear his name, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
That, I did this, it wasn't right, but I went to talk to the father, we try to get some kind of a deal going, I'm going to try to do whatever I need to make this situation, he's a prince, he can do whatever he wants to do, and get away with it, and who cares?
Probably go to order the people to do it, who knows?
But he also shows his influence over the town, too, that he's trying to at least, again, whatever they believe, I'm not talking about as a position where when it says he was more honorable than his household,
Mm-hmm.
even his father, well, that's because he's trying to figure out what he can do to make this right,
Mm-hmm.
clear his name for a day that wasn't, like I said, it wasn't right, it wasn't supposed to be done.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll make it right then. Yeah. No, and it's certainly more honorable. And note that part where it says he was more honorable than all the household of his father, that's, in a way, what you could call an editor's note in the story. It's not something that somebody said as things were going on. This is something that God had written in the story to indicate to us that his actions at that point were like you're saying. He was trying to do what he thought was right.
Right, now, again, he didn't know about God.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying to give him a pass, but I guess the lesson is, because we do know the Lord, what we're claiming to, and we do make a mistake, what is not just the repentance part, but then the restitution, what do I need to do to make things right in God's eyes, that we can also be called more honorable, because we are willing to not just confess and repent of the things we've done, but we go beyond and make whatever we've done that was wrong right, whatever the cost is.
Right.
I mean, this was a big cost on their part to make things right.
I think so.
Or not, the idea, I mean, it was physically painful for them. Sometimes making things right on our end is going to be painful. It might cost money or time or buying something that you broke or whatever it might be, but to make things right, what the cost might be, because we want to be honorable in God's eyes.
And that's the kind of zealousness that God does want from us, is that, yes, you have done something that's wrong, however terrible it may be, you can still go on and choose to do what's right afterwards, even if it's a great cost, and some of them are really a great cost. That we should be more like Shechem in that case.
Right.
Recognize, okay, I did something wrong. Let me pay for it, and have everybody else pay for it. Did their circumcision, everybody then get circumcised, did that gain them anything? Didn't gain them anything.
They thought
They thought it was going to. But in this case, certainly not spiritually, because it wasn't conveyed to them what the point of circumcision was, other than this is just the cost to be in the tradition of your family. And also not materially, because then they all end up getting killed. In Romans chapter 2, writer of Romans, ultimately God himself, is talking here about circumcision. He says this: "For circumcision is indeed profitable if you keep the law. But if you're a breaker of the law, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. Therefore, if an uncircumcised man keeps the righteous requirements of the law, will not his uncircumcision be counted as circumcision? And will not the physically uncircumcised, if he fulfills the law? Judge you who, even with your written code and circumcision, are a transgressor of the law. For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly. And circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter, whose praise is not from men, but from God." They were, again, trying to attain to the righteousness without the meaning that went behind it. And this is possibly, it would have been a great opportunity for Jacob's family to bring that message of who God is, of Jehovah, the one true and almighty God, to this town. They were willing to be circumcised. I don't think it would have been a great stretch to have also conveyed what that meant to them and have them agree to some of that as being a condition of them marrying together.
Well, sure. Even Moses talked about that when they left Egypt. Some Egyptians came, and then later on, Rahab was able to join. The Gentiles were able to join if they were able to, or willing to, one, accept God as the God, and then had to be circumcised. And you could then incorporate faith.
If you're willing to go along with it.
But it's not just, if I did that, I'm good. No, you did that, but it was a representation of you're willing to follow now God. And so even amongst that Jewish clan, outsiders came in, and they were able to become Israel by adopting
the rules that God had given them.
The law as well.
Yeah.
And
what they had of it.
Which was them following God and obeying Him.
Yeah.
And so Gentiles could become circumcised and then come under the nation of Israel. But it was also explained to them
it had to go hand in hand with that change of heart. Right. Was the reason you were doing it, not just to fit in with us. Yeah. And I see that as they could have done that. I think that probably would have worked. And I'd wager to say, can't say absolutely, but that if Jacob had taken the lead in making these negotiations and had taken that tact, the whole story of Israel could have been a lot different. Because what was the promise that God gave to Abraham? Is you be my people, I'll be your God, and what would he give them? He'd give them the whole land. It was his. From the time Abraham went there, took him up on the mountain and said, look, north, east, west, south, everything you can see is going to be yours and your descendants.
Well, it says all the nations will be blessed because of you. So the Gentile nations could have been blessed by
If
him explaining
they had been righteous.
They're supposed to be following. And the
Yeah.
reason why God had the Israelites destroy the Gentiles or the Canaanites is because they were evil and following false gods. But if they turned to him,
they'd have been fine. Yeah.
God wouldn't then accept them into also that faith of the nation of blessed. If Jacob was taking that through to explain.
To evangelize. Yeah. And really spread that out there. Because we see Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob all living, at least for parts of their lives, in that land, that promised land that God had given to them. And then what happens for the next 400 years? They are not there. God had promised that land to them, but why weren't they there? I see it as things like this, them being unfaithful and not being proactive about spreading that message.
And not being a 400 years, what happened to those pagan cultures?
They got worse and worse.
They had to bring them into the place.
Yeah. And so every day we got to be looking for those opportunities that God gives us to be a light and an ambassador to where we are, to where He has put us, to our promised land, wherever that might be, and to be spreading that message, and not just saying, "Oh, I'll wait till the right time, the right opportunity when they come and ask about things." But even this terrible circumstance, they could have turned that around and had a really great outcome from it. And they didn't. And so they get circumcised, and I see a corollary there. Think about the deception that can be wrought in people's lives, and even our own lives, going both ways. If we portray the holy and godly life as being going to church and participating in a Bible study and singing worship songs and reading your Bible, like that's the things you got to do, and you'll be cool and you'll get to live with God and be part of His family. And also, if that's what we look for in people, is those certain things, instead of evaluating a person and seeing what their heart really is, being able to judge the tree by the fruit that it produces, not just the things that they do every once in a while, and we look for these certain aspects and go, that means you're a good person and you're a Christian. To look instead for the heart and see if their lives are dedicated and determined to honoring and glorifying God instead. And that when we talk about the things we do because we're Christians, that's part of it, is we're seeking to glorify God, not just do these traditions. I don't know why we do them, we just do. And so they go, get circumcised, and then the treachery of Jacob's sons is revealed. And their passion, right? It's one thing if they had heard about this thing and like that day they go and they kill Shechem. That's passion. They acted in their passion. Here was a premeditated and well thought out and occurred over a period of several days plan that they went through. It wasn't just momentary. They had at least 3 days, however long it took for Shechem and Hamor to go back to the town, contact everybody, convince them to go through with this, actually do it. Then it was 3 more days before Simeon and Levi come in and murder them all. So they had several days to sit and think about what they were planning to do. Like, we're going to go there and we're going to kill them. We're going to go and kill them. Just got to wait. We're going to go and kill them. And their conscience didn't stop them at some point in there. And I don't know about you guys. I have not always been a good Christian person. And I've had plans to do things that I knew weren't okay. Some of them I ended up going and doing. Others I didn't because of that, well, that's my conscience. And typically the longer time there is in between the planning and the actual action being done, the more chance there is you're going to end up not doing it. Because you are thinking about it that whole time. This is pretty terrible. In this case, they're planning to go and murder a bunch of guys that they just convinced to mutilate themselves. They didn't. They stayed true to their cause for however many days this was. And retribution upon Shechem may have been justified if that had been all they were after. The slaughter of all the males, there in verse 25, they boldly came upon the city and killed all the males. There's no way that can be argued to be righteous. None of the laws that God gives to the children of Israel later on indicate this would have been the action that should have been taken in this kind of situation. No way. These men had, as you've been mentioning, Jeff, they've been trying to do right after having done wrong. They were trying to make it okay, to hold up their covenant. They'd entered into a covenant with the sons of Jacob to, we will do this and you will do that. They upheld their end with haste. It says Shechem did not delay to do the thing. Really honorable in this. And then they're betrayed by those who just so recently swore to be their friends and to get along with them and live in their land with them.
Where did they learn that deception from?
We see that running in the family for quite a while. Yeah, we do. And it continues after this. And not only is Shechem killed, Shechem's father is also killed. All the other men in the town, all the other males, they would have been older males. This indication in, verse 24, all who went out of the gate of his city heeded Hamor and Shechem. Every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of the city. This wouldn't have included little children. Little children would have been kept in the confines of the city for safety and other reasons. Once they got old and were able to go out and work in the fields or go out and be a warrior, they would have been one of those described as having gone out of the gates of the city. So everybody that was old enough to go out and do anything, circumcised, and they came in and killed them all. And then not only that, then all their stuff is taken as plunder. They really pushed this retribution thing. And it's just Simeon and Levi that come in and do the killing. Not necessarily the oldest either. Reuben would have been the oldest, and then Simeon, and then Levi, and then the rest of them. So we see the second and third oldest going in, killing everybody. Then, as far as we know, the rest of them that would have been old enough to carry things came into the town. In verse 27, the sons of Jacob came upon the slain, plundered the city. Took all their stuff. They took all the stuff that was in the city. They took all the people that were in the city. They went out in the fields, took all their animals, took all the stuff in the fields that they could take, and absconded with just everything. All of them were complicit in this deed, even if their hand wasn't the one that held the blade and stabbed and killed everyone. And this is a family who has, in their immediate history, record of a covenant between God and man, and how that was upheld, and how it played out over several decades. Here they go, and they're being God's representatives to the world here, making a covenant with other people in the world, immediately breaking it and murdering them all. Not much of a good portrayal of God to the surrounding area, to anybody that would hear about it. Then, finally, Jacob speaks up and says something. He really condemns his sons and makes them pay back for what they've done. No, he doesn't. He kind of just goes, oh no, you've made me look bad. He pleads the victim, is really all he does. Saying, oh no, now everybody's going to hate me and seek to hurt me because there's only a few of us. They're all going to come upon us and they're going to kill me and my family. We're all going to be destroyed. It's terrible. His concern is for himself and for his stuff, not for the name of the God that he has been serving for several decades now, that is in his family lineage, that people would have known about the things that happened with his father Isaac and with his grandfather Abraham. All he's worried about is himself. His lack of leadership led to all of this, and it led to temptation for his children, which caused sin, which caused death, which now for him even is causing fear. And all he does is plead the victim. And his sons, in turn, kind of respond in the same fleshly and worldly way. Their response is, should he treat our sister like a harlot? Modern vernacular, it would have been, yeah, but he shouldn't have done that. It is his fault. No, it's not our fault. We were just doing what came naturally. It's his fault that this all happened. Should he have treated her that way? No. Playing the blame game. There's no accountability. There's no resolution to bad things that had happened in there. Their actions, based on their own words, were only reactions to what Shechem had done. They were led again by their emotions and their feelings, just like Shechem had been, which led into this whole thing. It's a very great in its scale and very sad in its cause and the things that happened. A picture of what happens when people are led by their emotions, led by their feelings. Instead of stepping back from the situation, taking control of it and saying, okay, God, what should I do here? What would be the honorable way to take care of this situation? However terrible it may be. I don't have a daughter. People here do. But I can't imagine the rage that would come upon you hearing that something like this had happened to your daughter, and what you would want to do to the person who is guilty of that. And that's they act in that anger and in that rage and cause all this stuff. Instead of taking the opportunities they may have had to evangelize and make a good thing come out of a bad situation. Of note, I find it interesting, is the two sons. Which two sons was it that actually did the killing?
Second, third.
Yeah, it was. You were saying the names? Simeon and Levi. If you have a map in the back of your Bible that shows the 12 tribes of Israel and the land which they owned in Canaan, see where Simeon and Levi had their land.
Levi doesn't have one.
Levi doesn't get anything. Simeon is small and inside of Judah. They don't really have their own area. It's Judah gave them some of the area that Judah owned so that they had a place to be. They didn't get their own land. And in large part it's due to this incident right here. Levi's become the priest, which is very interesting. In Genesis 49, when Jacob is on his deathbed, he's giving a fairly extensive prophecy and about all of his sons. And in verses 5, 6, and 7, he talks about Simeon and Levi, chapter 49 in Genesis. Starting in verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. We see finally, this would have been, 50 years later when he's on his deathbed, he recognizes the temperament of those two sons, Simeon and Levi, that went through and did this. And we see, as we go on to when Israel becomes a nation in the land that they have, how his prophecy there, certainly spoken through the Holy Spirit, there's no way Jacob would have known what would happen future apart from that. How his prophecy becomes truth, being divided in Jacob and scattered in Israel. Simeon had some land that was really surrounded by one of the other tribes. Levi had no land. It is interesting. Why do you think, having done what was done here, and that kind of tainting the tribe of Levi, why would the tribe of Levi have gone on to become the priests? If this was the curse, basically, that was put upon that tribe. Can you think of something that the tribe of Levi did that was redeeming for them? Kind of rhetorical question, because I wouldn't have come up with it off the top of my head, but I researched it and found it. In Exodus chapter 32, we go on, and this is hundreds of years later. The children of Israel have been rescued out of Egypt, millions of them, by God and the miracles He's done. He's brought them across the Red Sea. They've gone for a couple of months. They're at the mountain of fire, and Moses is receiving the commandments and the rules and laws from God. He is up there for 40 days and 40 nights the first time. While he's gone, his brother Aaron is in charge. He's the high priest called by God. The people get very anxious and worried that, oh, Moses is probably dead up there. We have no leader. We need something to rally behind. Aaron takes a bunch of their gold, makes the golden calf. And they all start praising it and having a big feast and dancing and singing while Moses comes down from the mountain. Here's all that stuff. He breaks those 10 commandments that he had in his hand, the stone tablets. And he takes the calf which they had made, burned it in the fire, ground it into powder, scattered it on the water, and made the children of Israel drink it. And then in verse 25, he's trying to have Aaron, corral the people and get them under control. Verse 25 in Exodus 32. Now when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them, to their shame among their enemies, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him. And he said to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side and go in and out from entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. So the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Then Moses said, consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, that he may bestow on you a blessing this day, for every man has opposed his son and his brother. I see that action, particularly done by the sons of Levi, as the redeeming thing that brought them from that cursed tribe into the ones who became the priests of God, who served in the temple and in the tabernacle and had that place of honor because of that zealousness. And we see a difference between Moses and Jacob in this case. Moses actually takes action when the people have done something really terrible and wrong, and causes blessing and goodness to come out of it, whereas Jacob did not. And finally, hundreds of years later, the sons of Levi get their redemption. That all came upon them because of emotion and anger and acting on those feelings instead of stepping back, finding out what God wanted them to do, and doing those things. The consequences of all these actions were quite great indeed, and certainly damaged Jacob's family for a long time to come.